Previewing a blog post in production before publishing it is a must-have feature for any decent blog application. Luckily, implementing this kind of feature is quite easy thanks to Next.js preview mode. In this video, I will show you how to use preview mode in Next.js blog application to view draft content from a headless CMS. So you or your content manager can fast and easily view draft blog posts in production environment and this way make writing new posts much faster and easier. Let's start by taking a look what the preview mode actually is. So I have the Next.js docs for the preview mode open over here, and let's scroll down a little bit, and right here I think they explain the preview mode pretty well. So first of all, when we use headless CMS, we want to use static generation for our pages. And with static generation, the pages are built in build time, and that's totally fine. But when we want to preview a draft from the headless CMS inside our application, that's where the problem occurs, because in that case, we actually want the Next.js to render the page at request time instead of build time, and also fetch the draft content instead of the published content. So we would want Next.js to bypass the static generation only for specific cases. And that's the problem that preview mode is solving. And don't worry, this might sound a bit confusing at first, but bear with me, it's actually quite straightforward when we start coding it. So in order to use the preview mode, we need to create an API route where we call this res.setPreviewData function. And when we call this function, it sets some cookies on the browser which turn on the preview mode. And any request to Next.js containing those cookies will be considered as the preview mode. So basically, we need to create that API route and then call it once, and after that, every request we make will be considered a preview mode request. And if we scroll down a little bit, let's take a look at this section, securely accessing it from your headless CMS. So since we don't want everybody to be able to access our draft content, we want to protect it a little bit, so we can use a token for the API route. So we can call the API route with a token that is known by your API route, so your Next.js application, and the headless CMS. And in our example that we are going to code in just a little while, we will actually just toggle this preview mode on manually. So visit that preview URL, and after that we can make all the preview requests. And if we scroll a little bit more down, we can see that there is some definitions for the getStaticProps function. So what the preview mode does when enabled, it will provide the getStaticProps function with a context variable which will have the preview property set to true. So what we basically want to do is just to use this context.preview variable to determine the endpoint from which we want to fetch the data from. So if this is true, we want to use a preview endpoint for the headless CMS, which returns also the draft posts. Now that's pretty much all we need to know at this point. Don't worry if you don't quite understand yet. I'm sure it will become more understandable once we add the code for all this. So let's do that next. But before we continue, I just want to say thank you to this week's sponsor, DatoCMS. So DatoCMS is a complete and performant headless CMS, and it's super user and developer friendly. And DatoCMS also offers this real-time API, and it works seamlessly with the preview mode, enabling us to view our changes real time without a page reload. So when we click the Save Draft button inside the CMS, the changes will be visible in the browser instantly. I will actually also show you how to implement that to our own application, but more on that later on in this video. So let's start by implementing the preview mode. And I will use and implement the preview mode to our Next.js blog application that we created in previous videos. And if you missed those videos, I'll leave a links into the description. But basically this application is a simple blog using Next.js and DatoCMS as a headless CMS. So here is what the blog looks like. So we have a simple front page listing all the blog posts, and when we click one open, it displays the contents for that blog post. So I have the blog project open in my Visual Studio Code, and let's just list what we will do right now. So first we will add an API route for enabling the preview mode, and then let's also add a route for disabling it so we can easily test out that the preview mode is working and we are not getting the draft posts when the preview mode is disabled. And then we will modify the front page to display all the draft posts also, and then last modify the blog post page to show the draft posts if the preview mode is enabled. And of course for the number 3 also, if the preview mode is enabled, we will show the draft content. And maybe we can also add number 5, showing the changes in real time when we save them in the headless CMS, showing them in the blog post page in real time. So that's the thing I mentioned earlier about the real-time API in DatoCMS. But yeah, let's get started by adding those API routes. So I'm gonna go to the pages folder and then API and create a new file called preview. And inside this preview file, I'm gonna actually copy paste the code from the documentation. So if we open up the documentation, and right here we had the example for the API route, I'm just gonna copy that and paste it in. And since we are not going to use this slug right now, and this API route will only just enable the preview mode, we can actually get rid of this slug over here. And let's also just replace this token with something like secret token. And of course, in production, we would want this to be some hash or something, so nothing that you can easily guess. Okay, then we don't need this because we are not fetching the post in here. And after that, we don't need this either. And then we want to right here enable the preview mode. And right here, let's not redirect the user. Let's just print res.end preview mode enabled like this. So basically what this API route just does is checks the query parameter called secret and checks that it equals to this string, and if it does, it enables the preview mode and just prints the message for the user. And let me just clean this code up a little bit. So let's take and test this out. So I have my server running and I'm gonna switch to the browser and to the front page. Yeah, it works. Then let's go to the /API/preview. And then the secret is secret token, like this. It was that, right? Yeah, secret token. Now, if we go to that URL, we get the preview mode enabled. And if we change that token to be wrong, it gives us invalid token message. So looks like this is working right now. Let's add the end preview route also. So I'm gonna create a new file, endpreview.js, and for this let's switch to the docs and scroll down a little bit. And right here is how we can disable the preview mode. So by calling the res.clearPreviewData. So I'm gonna copy that and just paste it in like this. Let's save it and actually add res.end preview mode disabled like this. And now let's save it, switch back to the browser and go to that URL. So localhost /API/end preview. And we get the message and it should have cleared the preview cookies now. So both of these API routes are now created. So next, what we want to do is modify the front page to show the draft posts in preview mode. So let's open up the front page. So it's the index.js. And inside here, we want to modify the getStaticProps function. So if you remember, we got the context variable over here for the getStaticProps. And if the preview mode is enabled, the context.preview will be true. And in here, we want to check that if it's true, then we will make the request to a preview endpoint in DatoCMS. And if it's false, then we will make it to the normal published content API endpoint. And actually for this, it's quite easy because this request function actually already has the capability to check the preview value. So if we take a look at the lib and DatoCMS that we made earlier, right here we are actually getting the preview as a parameter, and then if the preview is true right here, we will use this GraphQL datacms.com/preview endpoint. And that endpoint will return all the published content, but also all the draft content. And if the preview is false, so the preview mode is disabled, then we will use this GraphQL.datacms.com endpoint that only returns the published content. And if we didn't have this logic right here in the request function, we could also do it inside the getStaticProps function. But since we do, all we have to do in this getStaticProps function is to pass in the preview variable, and it equals the context.preview like this. And that's pretty much it. Right now we should have the front page listing also all the draft posts. So let's take a look at the browser, and we have the end preview endpoint. Let's use the, I'm actually gonna open up a new tab that has the enable endpoint. So let's enable the preview mode. So /API/preview, and the secret was secret token like this. Okay, now the preview mode should be enabled. Next, let's go to the front page, and right here we still have the same blog posts as we did earlier, and that's because we don't actually have any draft content in the CMS. So let's switch to the DatoCMS, and I'm gonna add a new record over here, a new article, a blog post, and let's call this delicious meatballs like this. And then the author is there, and then let's upload a cover image, and let's add an excerpt, and let's add some content. So I'm just gonna paste in some lorem ipsum like that. Then the publish date, let's say it's that, and this like can be that delicious meatballs like this. So now we have the blog post ready, and if we save it, we can see that it's not published yet, so it is a draft. But now that we have the preview mode enabled, we should see it in our front page. So if I refresh the page, I can actually see that it appears over here. So that's great. And now let's test if we end the preview, so disable the preview mode and go to the front page and refresh the page. We can see it disappears, and now we only see the published content. So the front page is working. It was that straightforward and easy. So next, let's modify the blog post page. So I'm gonna enable the preview mode again, and then refresh the page. And now if we click the delicious meatballs open, we see we get an error, and this is just because the blog post page is not yet configured to use the preview mode. So let's do that next. So I'll open up the slug file. So this is the blog post file, and right here let's take a look at the getStaticPaths and getStaticProps functions. So right here we have the getStaticPaths, and since it's using the request function that we looked at earlier, right here, this one, all we need to do is to pass in the preview variable for it. So let's do that. So it gets the context as a parameter, and then we pass the preview value for the request function like this. Then let's modify also the getStaticProps function. So right here we want to catch the preview also, and then pass that in for that request function like so. And now let's save this, and I'll switch back to the browser and refresh the page. And looks like we get the content for that draft blog post, and it's working. And now again, if we disable the preview mode and refresh the page, we should get an 404 error as we do And if we enable that preview mode and then refresh the blog page with the delicious meatballs, we can see the content. So there you go. Now we have a blog application that uses the preview mode to display draft content from our headless CMS. And right now we just manually toggled the preview mode with the API routes, as you saw. But what we could also do is what they did in the docs. So right here. So we could also do it like this. So we would pass in the token for that API route and then the slug, and after that it would redirect the user directly to that post page. So this is something we could also do, and something that I would probably do if I were to use this a lot. But for this example, I just wanted to illustrate how the preview mode works. So that's why we did it manually with the API routes over here. And then last, I said I would show you how to implement the real-time updates for the blog post page. And let's do that next. So I'm going to open up the documentation for the real-time updates from the DatoCMS website. And right here we can see that they offer this use query subscription hook in the React DatoCMS package. And we can use that to display the updates in real time. So they have an example over here. So we pass in for the use subscription hook this subscription variable that we will return from the get static props function. And since we want to use this also for the draft content, if we scroll down a little bit, we can see that it can be used with the preview mode, and they have an example right here. So without going any deeper to this code in here, let's just jump into our application and implement this, and I will explain as we go. So I switch back to the Visual Studio Code. I'm in my slug file, and first let's import that use query subscription hook. So I'll add it up here like this, and then we want to modify the get static props. So let's go there, and for this I'm gonna copy paste from the documentation. I'll copy paste this part over here and paste it in, replace this post data and paste it in like this. Let's save it. Looks like I have one extra. Okay, and then we still need to define that GraphQL request. So I'll copy that too and paste it in over here and update this homepage query to be the article query, and then the variables will be this slug, so like that, and then the context.preview will be passed over there, and actually we want to do it like this. Okay, I can get rid of this over here. So right now we are defining the GraphQL request over here, and the query is the article query that is defined above here. And then we pass in the variables as we did earlier, and then the preview variable. Okay, and then what we do is we return in the props a subscription property, and based on the context.preview, and this is actually now also just preview, since we don't have the context over here, we are destructing it right there. So based on the preview value, if the preview is true, we will return a subscription object that has the stuff from the GraphQL request. Then we will have an initial data property that will use the GraphQL request with the request function that we defined earlier, that was over here, this one. So the same function we used earlier. And then we also want to pass in a token, and this is the next DatoCMS API token, and this is defined in the environment variables, and let me just check that that matches the name in my environment variables. Looks like it does. Okay, so that's what we return if we are using the preview mode, and if the preview mode is disabled, all we want to return is just this enabled property with the value false, and then the initial data that uses the request function and the GraphQL request for fetching it. So that's all the modifications we want to do for the get static props, but then we still want to use the hook inside our component. So right here let's add a new line and let's actually take a look at the documentation. So right here, I'm gonna copy this hook call and paste it into our code. So right here, we use the hook and now pass in the subscription for that hook, and the subscription is in the props. So let's actually add the props.subscription. So now it should work. And then from the hook, we get the actual data. If we have an error, we get that, and a connection status. So that's all, and I used the post data variable name earlier. So let's just do it like this. So const post data equals data. So this way I don't have to rename all the post datas over there. This is just a shortcut for this example. Okay, let's save this and test it out. Switch to the browser and I'll refresh the page. And looks like we get an error. Oh, this might be because right now in the data we still need to refresh the article like this. So the data actually isn't the actual article data right now, but the article data is defined in the article variable. Let's try that, and looks like it's working. I'm just gonna refresh the page one more time, and looks like the page is working again. So now the exciting part. So let's try modifying this blog post inside the headless CMS and see if we can display it in real time. So let me just rearrange these windows a little bit. Okay, so now I have the blog post open on the right hand side and then the blog post open in the headless CMS on the left hand side. So let's make a modification to this content over here. So I added this line over here, and now once we click this save button, it should appear instantly right over here. So let's give it a try. So I'll click it, and what do you know? There it is. It appears right here instantly. So this is pretty cool in my opinion, because right now you can just modify your blog content over here, and then when you save it, you can instantly see it in the browser in the web page. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps out.